Hi, I'm Nick from Xander, and in this video series we're keen to highlight the 10 things you need to consider when hiring your first CFO.
One of those particular areas to be aware of is growth trajectory. So what I mean by that is, as a founder, you need to consider what particular milestones you're looking to hit over the next 12 to 18 months. That could be anything from, particular acquisitions, geographical expansion, perhaps a systems implementation, and evaluate what that can do to your headcount and revenue. If there's a significant increase in both headcount and revenue over the next kind of 6 to 12 months in hitting those milestones, then it may be worthwhile evaluating the need for a CFO. If those growth milestones are quite modest, then it may not be a CFO you need. It could be a head of finance, could be a controller even.
If the next future milestone of the business is non-finance related, like going through a clinical trial or winning a key sales pitch to transform the business, then a CFO is unlikely to play a lead role, and therefore you don't need them in a full-time capacity, and you could consider them on a fractional or interim basis. Quite often we see CFOs twiddling their thumbs for 3 to 6 months whilst things outside of their remit are taking place until they're ready to progress to a full-time role again. A general rule is that the bigger and more complex the next milestone is, the more likely that you are to require a full-time CFO who is well networked with strong experience nailing this brief previously. For example, you'll need a full-time CFO if you're targeting an IPO or exit, whereas if you're looking for a £3 million seed raise, then a strategically strong head of finance or a fractional CFO can cover that. Again, there are many options available to you and many factors to be considered when deciding which approach to have.
Now, one of the main things to consider when hiring your first finance leader or CFO is that of the investor's expectation. The key things to consider when it comes to investors' expectations is that they have expectations pre-deal, post-deal. The later and the higher the volume of the fundraise, the more scrutiny will be on the finance function from the data and the communication. Founders can lead on that, but they will need some support along the way. So whether this is a debt raise or an equity raise, these processes can be kind of quite lengthy. So these elongated processes could be 6 months plus, and investors are looking for progression of the business during that time in terms of users, revenue, margin, and therefore a founder that's distracted leading on the fundraise alongside day-to-day CEO duties can have a negative impact on a fundraise. So having some outsourced fractional or full-time support on a fundraise would be massively beneficial. Clearly, the later the fundraise, the higher the value of the fundraise, the more you will need the external support, or the more you'll need a full-time resource within the business. Post-fundraise, we're looking at two things. We're looking at the quality of the insights and the cadence of the reporting, but also then the growth expectation of investors from that business. So when it comes to cadence and quality of the insights and data provided, the higher that level, the higher the level of finance leader you'll need in those particular areas of data and commercial awareness and the presentation and communication of that. And when it comes to growth and the growth of the business, a 300% growth business over a 2-year period will look very different to a 30% growth business over 2 years, meaning the complexity of the leadership, the international expansion, the revenue model will be far greater. So with those businesses, leaning on a more senior CFO versus a FD would be useful. Likewise, you can, if it's a more stable growth business, lean on the development of a head of finance FD that can step up to be the CFO, depending on the founder's background.
One of the key things to have a look at is the revenue model and ultimately the sector that your business operates in. For a company that's already achieving some sales, high volumes or low value transactions, generally seen in places like marketplaces, e-commerce, quite a lot of SaaS ventures, you're probably best off looking to nail the finance operations side of things and reporting before you look to hire a strategic CFO. So actually, in the first instance, you might be wanting to have a look at a financial controller or a head of finance type profile before exploring somebody a little bit more senior. On the other hand, you'll have other sectors such as AI, cybersecurity, biotechnology, deep tech side of things. There's lots of heavy R&D involved and big focus on the likes of fundraising, capital allocation and strategic planning. even before acquiring paying customers. In this instance, you're probably going to be wanting to have a look at somebody with the deep sector knowledge, somebody from that CFO or VP of finance background to support you on those activities.
One of those areas is, of course, considering the founder's background. If the founder has a background in consulting, banking, or even an accountant themselves previously in their early career, then it might not be that you need a CFO right away. It could be that you wait until Series B, C when you hit a scale to bring in a CFO, and it could be that you tap into outsourced resource to help with your day-to-day accounting, a fractional expert, or even bringing in an in-house controller. If you are not of a consulting or banking background and therefore may well struggle with the fundraising piece and building out relevant models, then bringing on a CFO at an earlier stage in a fractional capacity to begin with, and then becoming full-time, potentially when you hit Series B, could be the right call. So yeah, ultimately, if you're a technical background from a IT perspective or a marketing background, then for sure I would recommend you consider a fractional CFO at Series A, and then hopefully that person will become full-time at one point or another.
And today's topic is budget, which is obviously quite an important one, and one that we get asked quite a lot when hiring, as to what they should be looking at paying, and also what the bonus in equity should look like as well. So there's a couple of things, I guess, that we can look at today, and really the role of the CFO can vary hugely, and with that the salary can also vary, and it really depends on the size and the stage of the business, but also the future milestones that you have coming up, and what they look like, and also the growth trajectory of the business. So I think you need to be quite transparent with your future hire as to what that looks like, and make sure that we're not over hiring, but equally make sure we're not under hiring. So if you have an imminent milestone that you need support with, it's probably worthwhile looking at the higher end from a budget perspective of somebody that's maybe been through that milestone and can give you comfortability that they can lead it and own that process, and will bring the value that you are hopefully looking for. If you don't have an imminent milestone and you maybe don't have the budget available, you could also consider somebody that is maybe a head of finance or FD that hasn't done the CFO role previously, but has the capacity to kind of step up. The other thing that you might want to consider if the budget is a constraint is somebody on a fractional basis. And with that, you could look at somebody that's 1 or 2 days a week that could scale up as the business grows, or equally scale back. And it might be that you need to then bring somebody in-house when the time is right, and then you can hire your own CFO, when the business is a size that it needs that support. The other thing that obviously we get asked around is around the bonus and the equity. I think both of those pieces are crucial as part of the package, and something you need to be thinking about when tying in the overall budget. But we do have a salary guide which is available, which goes through the salary as well as the benefit package. And if there are any specific questions or you'd like to have a conversation, then please feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to discuss it with you.
Today's topic is all about skills and experiences. We would recommend that you highlight 5 essential experiences and skills that you would require in your venture for the next stage of your growth piece. You can then tailor your interview questions to specifically focus on these key areas. If you make the list too long, it will take the focus away from what you really need from your new CFO. You can then really dig into the specifics that this individual led with regards to key milestones that you would need support in your venture, such as asking for a deep dive into their experience leading a Series B with a US-based VC, or for example, delivering on a strategic M&A deal in their last business. By really focusing on those top 5 essential skills and experiences that you require from your CFO, you can really make sure that you hire the best CFO for your business.
And today we're going to talk about the topic of EQ, emotional intelligence. So it's so easy to think about IQ, intellect, the hard skills and experiences that you need in a CFO to bring into the business. But also, what are you thinking about the cultural element and the cultural addition to the business in hiring a CFO? So we need to find an individual that adds value and brings the right behaviours, characteristics and interactions with the business that are going to drive the business forwards in the right way. So here we're looking for individuals that have got a growth mindset, and have the agility to deal with the challenges that are inevitable in a startup. Someone who's got resilience and that drive to push through in challenging times. Someone who's got incredible communication skills and storytelling skills that inspire the teams below to follow, but also inspire the business to drive the right decisions. Someone who's got the ability to communicate and challenge the strategic plans, and its C-suite peers to ultimately make the right commercial strategic decisions for the business. So really do dig into kind of the behaviours and characters that you think the individual will portray, as much as you do around the skill set and the hard skills. Soft skills are just as important as the hard skills for a CFO hire.
Today's topic is career logic. Now let's assume that you've had success from your headhunting efforts or direct outreach or job advertisements or even referrals from your investors. And it's time to build a thorough assessment process to make sure you end up with the right person and the most impactful CFO or finance leader. Career logic is one that can easily get overlooked when interviewing, but it really allows you to evaluate a candidate's career trajectory, their decisions, as well as their future aspirations to determine if they align with your company and also the role that you have available. So to examine their career progression, you want to look at things like, is it logical? Evaluate and identify their motivations between moves and their long-term goals, but also look for consistency in their career story. Are their choices strategic? Are they well thought out? And do their career aspirations, as I mentioned, align with what you have available today? So if you miss this step, you run the risk of potentially underhiring or overhiring, but also you run the risk that the candidate may jump at a future opportunity that does match their career aspirations. So it's definitely worth including as part of your process. And if you have any queries or questions about it, please don't hesitate to contact me and I'm happy to have a conversation.
So you've seen loads of candidates, you've gone through the interview process, you've made your decision. One of the final things and the top tip for hiring your first CFO is taking references. Best suggestion we can provide is trying to get a triangulated set of references, ultimately picking up on various stakeholders that CFO might have been engaged with. That can be previous CEOs, it can be C-suite peers, it can be third parties, it can also be finance teams that they led previously. Down to you to decide the type of references that you'd like to take. There's two main methods that we would advocate. It's a phone call. You can dive into things, be a bit more personable from that sense. You've also then got the email, sort of written option, where you can be a little bit more prescriptive, formal around some of the key questions that you are looking to take. The things we look to cover ultimately are EQ, maybe cover off some of the achievements and value adds that they've added in previous roles, aligning to some of the stuff they might have mentioned at interview stage. And also their ability to just generally fit into the team, lead, and any development points you might have been questioning during the interview process. It's important to stress the confidentiality of taking these references. Usually you go to the candidate, ask who they've got in terms of referees, and they will provide details for you to reach out directly, or they'll coordinate that referencing themselves.